This is Healing Forward. I'm Barbara La Pointe. Welcome to conversations that challenge, inspire, and transform you. From best-selling authors to real-life warriors, these are the voices that remind us our story isn't over. We are evolving. Healing is not a destination. It's a decision that we make every single day. So let's move forward together. 3, 2, 1. Let's get started. Why do so many women, especially in midlife, find themselves repeating the very same painful patterns in love, even in business? Well, sometimes they've even done the inner work and they clearly understand what they don't want to experience anymore. Well, we're going to dive deep into exactly this today with our very next special guest, Nathalie. Nathalie Volan. Hi, I'm so thrilled that she's joining us today on Healing Forward, has a PhD, and she is a psychotherapist, very passionate on this subject, and she helps women heal from narcissistic and abusive relationships. She has a global background spanning Russia, Canada, Europe, Asia, and now she's in Mexico. And she really speaks to helping women retrain their nervous systems to finally break free from these harmful and hurtful patterns. Welcome, Nathalie.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's just such a delight to be here with you.
Yeah, it's really lovely. And I have to say, I usually research my guests or I know them, and I always feel into them before they come and into this space that we've created. And I just really sense that you're very passionate about this and we're about the subject. And it's such an important subject. What fuels your passion?
You know, now that I'm in Puerto Vallarta and I was really fortunate to forge new friendships, especially with women. And I have witnessed so many women who come here to, who are ready to reinvent themselves in a new and beautiful location. And yet, wherever you go, here you are. They bring the same patterns with them. And even though they have done usually so much work, but in so many cases, they end up unfortunately falling into the same hole. And knowing that, here we go again, how long is it going to take me to come out? And just really wasting a lot of time, energy, and sometimes financial resources on a relationship, a friendship, which didn't really deliver what it promised. So I'm really passionate about helping women because many of them end up suffering in isolation. There is a lot of shame that is attached to kind of not even listening to your own intuition, because we always know, we see the red flags, and yet we ignore what feels right to us, and we make a story, we excuse the person's behavior. So I'm just really, really passionate about supporting these women. And if I can shorten their time in that unpleasant hole, I'm here.
Yes, well, I love that because, when we go through such a trauma, it's an experience, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. But we do need support because women do suffer. And these type of relationships can really set us back years. As you know, I have a group that's very active, and what I've noticed in this group is that the pattern repeats, and sometimes it's not the first relationship, it's the second or third. And that, I think that carries more shame as well. And so we keep coming back to this repeated pattern, Natalia. So why are we repeating this harmful pattern?
Well, unfortunately, many of us experienced childhoods that were not really optimal for our growth and development. I can speak to myself. My parents were born after the war, so they were children of very traumatized parents who came back, from the front. And at the time, for all of those soldiers and veterans who were suffering from PTSD or complex PTSD, there were no tools. So they were acting out very unhealthy ways of being inside of their families. And usually, who was on the receiving end of that, just dysregulation, abuse, ill mental health, and often, drinking. It was the children. And the children got imprinted by very unhealthy ways of beings. And because they were powerless and small, obviously children cannot escape from their parents. So, and the conditioning that we receive within our families, especially before the age of 7, it really imprints very, very deeply into the nervous system. And it's kind of difficult to change, especially when you don't really do any work on yourself. Because first of all, it's really important to become aware what is familiar to me, right? For example, I can say that in my case, my mother did not respect my boundaries, and I kept on trying to explain to her how hurtful her behavior was. And so later on in my relationships, I ended up attracting people who did not respect my boundaries. And instead of just walking away, I kept on explaining to them. And now, after having done many, many years of work on myself, I know that if somebody doesn't understand the basic privacy needs of somebody, it's not my job to educate a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old man or woman that, what we take kind of like as for granted as basic courtesy is something that I need to fight for in a relationship. So now I just know that it's not going to work, and without any drama, I walk away.
I think boundaries is such an important subject. Because if we don't know how to form boundaries, we can't really protect or be safe. But many women really struggle with, how can I create healthy boundaries? From privacy issues like what you said, all the way through. And if you don't know what it even looks like to create boundaries, and your boundaries through your life have been violated, where did they begin?
Well, here I just want to kind of to make an important differentiation. So there's a really big difference when it comes to setting boundaries in a relationship with a healthy person and an unhealthy, abusive, let's say narcissistic person. So in the first case, in a healthy relationship, the person is listening to begin with and noticing your discomfort. And in many cases, even before we say anything, the person who is actually listening and paying attention to us might notice that we're not okay and can check in and can ask, is everything okay? Is maybe I did something wrong? Because the empathy is there, the attunement is there. And so in this case, it's not that difficult to specify and to say that, I didn't really feel comfortable in that particular situation. So would you mind, when it happens, when we are, let's say, in public, the next time, just don't make a comment about, let's say, my, I don't know, family situation or my job search. And the person says, oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Okay. And this is the end, right? It's like, that's it. You don't have to come back to this conversation ever again in a healthy relationship, because the person is listening, cares about your feelings, and has empathy. But in the case of a narcissistic relationship, when we set boundaries, it's almost like we're telling this person which buttons to press.
Oh, wow. That's so
Yeah,
well said.
exactly. So we need to be really careful, So, for example, let's say, somebody is in a narcissistic relationship and they cannot leave immediately, because we keep on hearing this advice, why don't you leave, just walk out. It's not an option for many people, especially women with children, or if there is like a really serious business entanglement, and people just have to stay together for some time. So let's say you feel really triggered when this person starts to discuss politics. And you already know from experience that if you are to communicate this verbally, the person will know what is unpleasant and will keep on going back to this issue. So you can just simply decide for yourself that if this behavior that I don't like starts, I'm just going to walk out. I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to go take a shower. I'm going to make an excuse and just to remove myself from the situation.
I think that's an excellent strategy, Nathalie, that we can use, because you really can't. It's very hard to win a fight with a narcissist or set a boundary that's respected. So I think that's a good strategy. I love that you have compassion for women, because we do often just hear, well, just leave, exit the relationship. Another thing I've noticed is that often women don't have or are underprepared in preparing an exit strategy. So these strategies are helpful as you're making the exit. Now, let's back up a little bit, if it's okay with you, to this conditioning that you were talking about in early life, because I know that you wanted to speak to the mother wound.
Yeah, so, and as I'm thinking about this and discussing this topic with you, I know that the Mother's Day is coming up, and it's kind of triggering for many people who actually have their mother wound, right? Because there are posts on social media everywhere. My mother is my hero. My mother is my best friend.
It's very triggering, very triggering.
Yes. And so for people who didn't actually have this experience, it can be quite upsetting, right? Because I think when it comes to mothering, when it comes to motherhood, we really expect mothers to get it right, right? The fathers, they kind of like, they're a little bit off the hook, but the mothers, we really think that it's just something so special, so precious. So when we grow up with the mother who didn't really get it right and even was abusive, it can be also very lonely and isolating, because it's our primary relationship that sets everything up, prepares us for just being in the world. And when we didn't really get a lot of nurturing from our mothers, we're starving. We're starving for love, we're starving for attention. And what can happen is that we start looking for this attention in places where we shouldn't really be looking for it. And because we don't really know what it feels like in the body, in the heart, and the nervous system to be just on the receiving end of this unconditional love that is there for us, just anytime. Doesn't matter what kind of mistakes we did, and what happened. We can just come to the mother and she's going to embrace us without any conditions. And unfortunately, not everyone had experienced this in their childhood. And I find that it's really necessary, especially, I would say, in midlife, if it didn't happen before, to finally form a healthy, nurturing relationship. Usually, it works especially well if it's a therapist who is there for the woman on a consistent basis and who can kind of like reinstall this mother archetype. Yes, because we need this. It's kind of like, it's almost like a program, right? But like for those who didn't experience the nurturing mother, there is a distortion in the field and the body. That's why you tend to attract partnerships that are not really good for us. So I think that's why it's important to be with somebody who is there modeling the healthy, nurturing and attention that is not volatile, like in many, narcissistic relationships, or unpredictable. So I find that, when people, women and men who come into therapy to work on their mother wound, just their overall well-being and even abundance in business increase exponentially when they work on the mother wound.
Yeah, I feel if this is resonating with you listening to this conversation, I invite you to subscribe and maybe make some comments. We'll be monitoring the comments live. But I think what you said is so important, because sometimes we might have heard, oh, the mother wound, I've heard of that. Mm-hmm. Or, oh, what's that? And get really curious. But this, to me, is some of the most deepest, profound work that we can do. And we're actually looking at it, if we widen the scope, it's really what Nathalie is discussing is inherited family trauma cycles, these cycles that we started off talking about that we just repeat. And I love that you said, that receiving from your mother, that receiving that unconditional love that you were, and that's really what it is. Because what happens, and let me know what you think, Natalia, is that if we didn't receive that then how we have trouble receiving from life in general, whether, and just receiving in life, receiving love, receiving payments in business, receiving abundance. It affects everything.
Exactly, because we don't really have, a model for this. We don't even know in many cases that it's possible. So, because a child who grows up with the mother wound is what we call a parentified child. So, the child is actually the parent, the child is the mother. So, what ends up happening is that this kind of child is just keeps on giving, keeps on catering, keeps on, pleasing, keeps on adjusting, and that's how it plays out in the adult life, right? Why are people people pleasing and over giving and over explaining themselves? It's because this is what they learned, and they learned those patterns to survive, because child would do anything to appease the mother who is in distress, who is angry, who is unpredictable. And it's unfortunate, but that's what I have seen many, many times in friendships and in business collaborations here in Puerto Vallarta, when there's one person who just keeps on taking while the other person is, despite all of the qualities that are amazing and qualifications, who is in this subservient role and just keeps on giving and giving and giving, and just really unhealthy.
Yes, this is that's true. I mean, I love that we are doing this around Mother's Day to help mothers, because sometimes mothers who then have partnered with narcissistic men, sometimes they end up losing their children to these men, or losing their identity, or you use the word suffering, and suffering in isolation, I think really is so true. So, how can women move forward and install this archetype as you so beautifully described?
So I guess, what's coming to me is that a woman really has to be ready. There comes a point in life when somebody just needs to say, enough is enough. Like, enough is enough. And the second part of this is a recognition that I cannot do it alone. I need help from the outside, because I can see that I am replaying the same kind of way of being, the same behavior. I'm attracting the same type of people, even though I have moved to a different country. So, just the real recognition of the fact that the outside help is needed. And usually, at this point, we're talking about professional help, somebody who has experience working with this issue, who is compassionate, non-judgmental, and who can create a safe space. So usually it's a therapist, a mental health coach, and somebody, who, like, you have to resonate with this person, right? Because this work is really intimate, it's very deep, so it's really important to find your person, right? Because there's so many people out there, and to really, for this work to be effective, one has to feel safe, right? Because when the safety is there, and for a woman or a man who has suffered from this kind of like narcissistic abuse or just being stuck, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt. So one has to feel really, really safe to kind of like bring up all of that material to the surface and to look at it without judgment, just to see what is there. And then once it comes to the light, in the presence of a compassionate witness, we can see that actually, now that we're looking at this dark stuff, it's not that scary and it doesn't have to control us.
That's very hopeful. Very, very hopeful that you can give women these tools in your practice, because I imagine a lot of women do have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And how does that show up? Like, what would a woman be experiencing? We've talked about boundaries. We've talked about being in narcissistic relationships. We've talked about repeating them. But if they're breaking away, what other things might, show up for them? See, complex stress disorder.
Well, for women who have been in a dysfunctional relationship for a long time, I would say that many of them are actually in what is known as functional freeze.
Functional freeze.
Functional freeze. So it's kind of like it's freeze response, but it's functional. So they're still able to do things in life, but usually there's a lot of procrastination. Every single task might seem like an uphill struggle.
It feels hard. Everything feels hard.
Everything feels hard. Even things that they used to love doing feel like, they have to psych themselves up for it. So, and they might, because, usually people don't know that this is a nervous system response. They think that they're lazy, that they lack energy, and they're very hard on themselves, and they don't live their lives fully because everything seems hard. And then when they do push themselves to do things, they go to social functions, to really kind of like go for a project that they've been wanting to implement, they end up burning out.
Oh, burning out.
Burning out, yes, because basically what needs to happen for them is that they need to retrain their nervous system from this fight, flight, or freeze response that they have entered as a result of what happened in childhood and then got compounded by the abusive relationship. So they've been living basically like this. And that's why I love gentle feminine breath work that I do, is because it retrains the nervous system to come back into a healthy state of being, which is rest and digest. So the person can just finally relax inside of themselves, create inner safety, generate inner well-being and balance and harmony. There is a cornucopia of like really amazing stuff inside of ourselves. Like really, we don't need anything from the outside, but because when we're scared, right, and that's what happens in abusive relationships, people just stop breathing. Breath is very shallow, right? Because we are, like when the animal is frozen, they're pretending to be dead, right? So they're like, the breathing is very shallow because they're trying to be very small, very, they're mimicking death, right? So that's what happens to people. They just stop breathing, and as a result, their nervous system gets stuck in, in the trauma, basically, because the energy is not moving. That's why I love in my work. And actually, as I started talking about it, I started breathing myself. It's so simple, right? Breathing, but in a particular way, to just get the nervous system to come back into its natural state of relaxation, instead of like always like being, like so tense or.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I'm sure a lot of women, it's going to relate to that, making yourself small and unseen and unheard and
Yeah.
functionally frozen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think what I'm going to ask you is a fair question, but I think someone might wonder, how long will this take if I go in to do clarity breath work? And every case is individual, I'm sure. But when could you begin to see results or positive shifts doing this type of breath?
Well, actually, people see results after one session. They can see the difference. But like with everything else, you don't go to the gym once, right? You have to keep on going, at least for a period of time, to create change and to let it stick, right? Because sometimes like we change something really, really fast, but then we're not able to hold on to it. So I would say that to have a series of at least 10 sessions, of course, depending on, personal history, but a series of 10 sessions can really make a difference.
That's amazing. It's such a relaxing experience to talk with you about this. I feel like a couple of times you've mentioned relocation. I know you're very global and you've been in several continents, but a couple of times you mentioned, and I just want to touch on it, that when you move to a different country, which is a very relevant subject, people are moving all over the planet now, and you want to reinvent yourself, but yet wherever you go, there you are. Do women become even more vulnerable when they make a relocation, in your view?
I think so, because when we relocate, we are outside of our normal context. So it really makes a difference because everything is just different, right? Like, let's say when we are in Canada or in United States, just by seeing where people are placed, I guess, within the community, we can gauge a lot about them. And here, let's say in Puerto Vallarta, in the expat community, many people are without their extended families, and there's just, there's a lot of excitement because this place is so beautiful and everyone would love to stay here. And sometimes this excitement can really interfere with how much attention we are paying to our intuition. So I think it's really important when we find ourselves in a new context and a new culture. And, really, I think in Puerto Vallarta here, there's like an intersection of different cultures and communities. Really take your time to get to know people. I think it's really important to slow down to give yourself space, and if you don't have to be on somebody else's schedule, right? All of us are different. So I think it's really important that, when something feels off, just slow down and don't rush into anything. And there's nothing wrong with listening to your body, to your intuition, to your sixth sense, and just saying to a person, I really love this offer, this invitation, but I would like to take a couple of days to think on this, and just take your time. No rush. I think it's really important when you're new to a place.
I think that is incredible advice for wherever you are and whatever your circumstances, to slow it down and take your time. That's a really, really valuable advice. For any other golden nuggets before we close today, Natalia, for women listening that maybe are thinking of re-entering into a relationship, maybe they're aware they have a mother wound, maybe they're not. I mean, what would you like to impart to a woman listening right now? Obviously, she's here for a reason.
Well, I love what you just said. It's my favorite verb here, and listening. Are you listening to yourself when you're speaking to a new person? And is this new person listening to you? In the conversation, who is talking? Is this person asking you questions? Because, I think this is the most important, I would say, red, orange, purple flag. You are speaking to somebody, but you feel more like a captive audience in a one-man show, and the person is just keeps on talking with this incredible charisma and charm, and not asking you questions about you. I think this is a very, very basic kind of like red flag, to recognize in a interaction. Because, in a relationship, new or old, we strive for balance, we strive for harmony. It's a great thing to be able to express yourself, to say, what's moving, what's in your heart. But it's also nice when, the person is actually listening to you, right? And give and take. If you're dancing, if you're not just like watching one person dancing around us and kind of like applauding them.
Yeah. Clap now. We'll say clap now.
Exactly.
Yes, that's beautiful. Do you believe that we can experience unconditional love in our human experience?
Unconditional love? Okay, I guess I would say something that is kind of controversial.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a relationship, especially in a romantic relationship, love is conditional. Because our resources, time, energy, money, those are limited resources. So we have to choose with a lot of discernment on how we want to allocate those resources. And if the relationship is not mutual, if the relationship is not nurturing, and those are conditions, right? if we feel that we're not being appreciated. So then why keep on allocating our time, our energy, that we can never get back to somebody who is not meeting our conditions? That's how I see it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And what is one wish that you would have for your fellow woman on the journey?
My wish is just really connect with your heart and with your body, and know that you are powerful, you're beautiful, no matter what age, you're wonderful, and don't allow anyone to diminish your worth. Don't allow anyone to just give you little breadcrumbs of attention. If somebody is not there to receive you in all of your beauty, power, and just amazing qualities that you have, if you don't feel loved and appreciated in the company of this person, don't waste your time. Just walk away.
Thank you for that, Natalia. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom and your practice. I really valued it, and I hope everyone listening also values it. How can folks reach out to you if they want to have a Zoom session or a in-person session with you?
They can simply email me. I'm reworking my website, so my email is Dr. Natalia Volanberg @gmail.com, and so maybe you can post it in the show notes for the folks too.
I am going to put all of that in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe and like. And thank you, Dr. Natalia. Wishing you all the very best in your life here in Puerto Vallarta and beyond.
Thank you so much. And I just loved the conversation we had. I'm feeling really inspired. Thank you.
Healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments like these. Wherever you are in your personal journey, honor it. If this episode meant something to you, share it, leave us a review, and stay connected for more conversations that move us forward. Until next time, I'm Barbara La Pointe, and remember, keep healing forward.